For those of you who today are feeling wounded or rejected, welcome to Inconceivably Worthy, a podcast where we are unearthing our worth that is beyond what we can ever imagine in Christ. I'm your host, Drexel Park, and for today's episode, we are going to explore how we grieve our child's disability and also still declare their worth and yours. But before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to encourage you to pause and just feel the room, feel where you are, and join me in an opening prayer. Father, take our doubts, our wounds, our fears, take our worries and everything we are holding on to, every burden, every have to, everything we feel like we should be doing, Lord. And we just lay it at your feet, knowing you will take care of us and that you have something here. Trusting, Lord, that your Spirit can speak and encourage and breathe life into us so that we see ourselves with your eyes and therefore can see others with that same love that you have for us. Father, speak and be glorified and show us you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, why are we starting with a discussion about grief when we're trying to explore human worth? The catalyst for this whole podcast and this whole topic of human worth began when I had my son. I was the type of person that measured her worth constantly by the grade, the rank, the score, the profit. There was always a number that I could compare myself to other people. It was always this ongoing finish line I could never reach. And then I have a son who I've been praying for years, who's born with Down syndrome and then picks up other disabilities along the way. And constantly in every metric, he's being rated in the bottom 1% of the bell curve. How do I look at that and see that my son is still made in the image of God? As I meet people in the community that are disabled, I am seeing people made in the image of God, and I am realizing human worth is totally opposite than what I've lived it to be. But in order to really discover that, to really see my son's worth and celebrate it, and then as a result, my own, I had to go through grief. I had to go through the dark tunnel, the scary, I don't want to get there because everyone's relying on me. I'm not allowed to feel this way. I just need to champion and be happy and be positive and tell people how amazing the whole life is. Circus. And that had to fall apart, and I had to feel my feelings. And that just ushered a huge change in every part of me and my life and my relationships. And I met a grief and trauma specialist who I will be interviewing and sharing today with you that just rocked my world and was just part of the journey that navigated me to finding healing from this and understanding and accepting grief so that I could find my son's worth. And I'm hoping along the way, together, we can learn we are not alone in this journey, that these feelings are good feelings, and that there's another side to them that isn't dark and scary, but actually lovely, beautiful, as we're about to hear Anne-Marie, the grief specialist, share, and that this journey is worth walking, and that you are worth knowing and being heard and being seen and living. So let's begin. Today, I have for you the woman who started this healing grief journey for me, Anne-Marie Lockmyer. Anne-Marie is a grief specialist, an 8-time award-winning author on grief, a founder of the Grief and Trauma Healing Network, and co-creator of mygriefcare.com, an online grief support platform. Anne-Marie works with people worldwide on healing after loss. She is passionate about advocating for and loving grievers and being an educational catalyst to society on grief and loss. Anne-Marie, my dear, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming.
Hello, Drexel. It's so nice to be here.
How common is it for parents to feel grief over their kid's disability?
I I don't want to say 100%, but how could you not experience some of those feelings? And yes, we're talking about disability, but I think that it's very common for many parents to feel grief over their kids for many reasons. So for instance, in my case, that my son had a mental health condition. And so I guess we would call that a disability as well. And I certainly experienced grief over that. However, I didn't realize it was grief. So I would say I think the majority of us parents do experience grief over our children for various reasons, but we often don't even realize that's what it is.
How do you define grief and what is its purpose?
Grief is like the deep emotional angst that you would have over a loss. And when I say loss, it's usually a hurt, something that hurt you. So, what's the purpose of grief, though? Why would we have all these feelings? Okay. The purpose is to get you through the pain. Like it's to acknowledge that you do have pain, and not everybody responds the same way. So I always tell people the only cure for grief is to grieve. And it sucks because everybody wants a quick fix. And we just give me these 4 steps that I can do, or we don't want to deal with those feelings. So then we stuff them. And so when I work with people, I find that sometimes it could be 20 years later because they just haven't wanted to deal with it. And it's not usually that they want to stay with where they are feeling. Oftentimes it really comes from a place of fear, right? Like what's going to happen if I actually acknowledge these things? So I find they just need some education and some help to understand even what's going on. Because I think, I don't know if you would agree or not, Drexel, that society really doesn't talk about grief. I mean, we don't understand it. We don't know what to do with it. When you see a grieving person, and I'll talk about grieving for the sake of this, losing a loved one, how awkward is that, right? And we don't know what to do with it. We don't like to see people sad. And we've also been told often in society that we aren't supposed to have sad feelings. Right? We're not supposed to. We always like praise someone for the good feelings, but when someone's sad, it's always like, "Oh, don't be sad." Like even think of a child. When a child falls or something, what's the first thing we say? "Oh, you're okay, you're okay." Or we try to talk them out of something. I think of again a child's disappointment when they didn't get invited to the party or they didn't make the team. Instead of allowing them to actually feel sad about it and saying to them, that's terrible, that this really hurts, I'm very sorry that this happened to you. What do we say? There'll be another time, right? There's going to be something better on the way. And it doesn't mean that that isn't true, but what we're doing is we're teaching them, so you're not supposed to feel those things. And we want to teach our children and society that all feelings are welcome. Now, we don't necessarily want to stay with them all the time and have them rule our lives. We want to teach people how to work through them, right? To be resilient in that. But to acknowledge them is really important.
And how do you grieve and love your child? Isn't that like an oxymoron? Is that a sin?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, that's where guilt comes in. See, we're getting these mixed messages that we can only have good thoughts, right? And good feelings, where grief, that describes the emotions that are related to a loss or pain. With a disability, it would be very common, for instance, to first of all feel fear, right? Fear of what's the future for this child hold? What's the future for me going to hold? Now, believe it or not, that would be an emotion of grief, right? Dealing with this because things may not have turned out the way you thought they were going to for this child. You could also have disappointment, which just because you had other plans. That would be normal. And see how here's the key too, we're not going to judge them. And I think that's what's so hard is that we think if we feel this way, we're not loving. And that's not true at all. These would be normal feelings, and we should be allowed to express all of those feelings in a healthy way. But you also have maybe loss of hopes and dreams that you had for that child. And that is also grief. It's all part of it. It could have an impact on your marriage. So look at all these things, right? So can you see how it would be totally normal to grieve? But that doesn't mean you don't love your child. Of course you love your child, but there are some things, and again, God can use this in the way they are in a beautiful way, right? Beautiful things can come from this, but it doesn't mean that there aren't painful emotions that are also surround us with this. And the importance is just being even allowed to recognize them and not judge them, and then do something with them and understand that it doesn't mean you're a bad parent. So you can have sadness, disappointment, fear, while still loving your child. Absolutely, they coexist. And the more you can actually recognize this and do something about it, I think the more you're going to be able to love your child and yourself.
I picture the movie Inside Out and like how the whole cast of emotions are there, but even in the parents' brains, the parents have sadness and anger, and it's about their kid. So why not with a kid with a disability would you have those same emotions, and all of the emotions love their child. So I thought that was super helpful for me to see a cartoon version of helping accept my feelings.
I love what you said about the movie, Drexel, because when I'm working with someone, when we do these, when we get into the grief exercises, we provide them with an emotional cheat sheet.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because it's so important to be able to describe your emotions. Like, we don't want to hear when it, for the purpose of trying to work through these things and clearing them, I don't want to hear sad or angry. We got to go deeper. Right. And there's so many great words that we would probably say, oh, that's how I feel, but we might not come up with it on our own. But when we see it on a list, we can, oh, okay, that's it. And the more we can pinpoint what it is, then that's going to be an easier thing that we're going to be able to clear.
How does a parent know they're feeling grief? I mean, what can grief look like? I just picture someone sobbing the whole time, but is it not always just that?
Sadness, disappointment, resentment, fear, right? Feeling misunderstood, confusion, guilt, because you feel these things and then you feel guilty for feeling these things because then you think that means you're terrible. You could also be feeling regret. And then the mental distress that goes along with that, which could be you're stressed out, you're anxious, you could be depressed, right? All those things could go along with it. And that would be grief. So if you're feeling any of those things, you're probably experiencing some grief.
Can
Okay.
grief look like anger? Because I feel like I went on a righteous rampage on everyone that wasn't including my son. And I think it might have been other emotions, but I think grief might have led the way there a little bit for me.
Oh, I think it's perfect. I think that's a great example, Drexel, because what was the loss? Can you explain it?
Sunday school, the first time we finally had the courage to bring him, it was 3 years old, and I thought, what's the worst that could happen? And then they called us out of church and said, we're sorry, the other 3 year olds didn't understand your son. And I just felt so indignant because I was like, why would 3 year olds need to understand my son at this stage? And it was just this like anger. I just remember it boiling up.
So let's look at that, because the loss is that he wasn't being welcomed, right, into that church group.
Yeah,
And you want your son to be welcomed there.
yeah.
So that would be a loss, right? And that hurts. So you responded in anger because you want to protect your child. You hurt for your child. But I would actually say, even though you responded in anger, the emotion, anger is always secondary. We know that there's always something that leads to the anger. I would say it would be hurt.
Mm, yeah,
It could even be rejection,
yeah.
right? Like if we got onto that emotional cheat sheet, what happened there that set off that anger, right? That would be understandable. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it was the expectation that the church, Christ people, would be the ones most accepting and loving of my son. And then seeing that was his first place of rejection made no sense to me. And so I think the hurt, because I believed in the church, I believed everyone there would be safe. Yeah, it became
Okay.
anger. So that's interesting.
So that's disappointment
Yeah.
as well. But you could also feel disillusioned because you had these expectations. I thought so. There's a lot there. You describe it really well. But look at what happened in that whole situation.
What
Hmm.
what do you think keeps us from feeling our grief?
It's guilt. If I feel these things, I'm a bad person. I'm not supposed to feel these things because I love my child, and this is some of the stuff that I had to go through when I was finally ready to process the grief, around my son and his life. It was thinking, I don't even want to admit that I feel these things because a mother shouldn't feel these things. And so, but I needed to for my well-being and then to be a better mother to him. I'm not just those feelings. And the other thing is that I think we might not even recognize that we're feeling these things. So I don't think we're necessarily trying to keep from feeling it. We just might not even realize that it's grief. We just might feel stressed out. We might feel we're kind of moody, angry, tense, and things like that. But we don't really recognize that maybe that's because there's some hurt going on,
Mm.
right? Some
Yeah.
disappointments, some feelings, some deep emotions that are stirring us. And maybe we are stuffing them and we just don't want to go there. But it's also possible that we're not even really aware of them, but they do manifest. But I could even see in a marriage where you might actually take it out on your spouse, some of the feelings that you might be feeling surrounding your child
Yeah.
because of the stress and that. And of course, men and women have different ways, mothers and fathers, in dealing with their grief as well. And so that can be a whole problem right there too,
Yeah.
because you can grieve for your child in different ways, and often that can be misunderstood.
I met a mom last week and she was saying, I can't stop to feel because I'm holding everyone together. Like, I think that there can be a fear that if I grieve, my whole family will come down with me. Like, I'm going to fall and everyone else will fall with me because I'm holding everything together and everyone together.
Well, look at that example of what you just said, of that poor woman, right? And I would say that that is a common feeling, because what we do think, we're holding everyone together. If I lose it, what's going to happen? And oftentimes we think that if we go there and grieve, we'll just break. These are like deep emotions, and it's very scary to go there. Even if you would like some relief and to feel better, it's very scary, which is why a lot of people won't do the work, because they're just afraid they're going to break and they're never going to recover, which I can now tell you that's not true, because I've worked with so many people and I've been there myself, but I had the same fear myself. I thought, I'm going to break and I will never be able to pick up the pieces. So let's just think, if you could be brave enough, and that's what I tell people, it's not to not be scared, right? Courage is, I'm scared, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you can have the courage to go there, to that place, and to grieve and to acknowledge the emotions, and then to work with someone to clear them, right? To actually clear them, because there's so much that we're carrying, that's only going to free you. And oftentimes, what people will say is, they feel different, they feel lighter. And for me, when I was able to process all the feelings related to my son, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, I had resentment towards him. Can you believe I had resentment towards him for not him being not who I wanted him to be, right? Or that he had made my life so difficult, that my life revolved around him. And that is a terrible, terrible thing for a mother to say. Mother should never feel that way. But guess what? When I was able to process it and clear it, with a professional, I was able to love my son even more, because I wasn't carrying that, which was then making me kind of ornery, right? Stressed out, and even short with my son. I was a better mother. Now, would I share these things with my son? Oh, not at all. Right. But with a person that was safe and could help me clear them, it's only good. It'll only benefit you. Sometimes even physically, you're going to feel a difference, energy wise, anxiety, because we don't even realize what we're carrying till it's actually moved. You may think that the issue is just with this, let's say the child, but there's probably other things in your life too. And once you understand how to do it, you can just keep clearing things. But again, it completely appropriate to think that you might break. I call what we do brutal,
Yeah, I love that.
because
I forgot
it's
that phrase.
it's brutal, because it is hard work, and we're going to a place of pain, deep pain in you. But at the same time, when we can acknowledge it and work with it and then clear it so you can be free to enjoy all the good emotions, and to fill your heart up with that, that is beautiful. It takes that circumstance that was causing you pain and it relieves some pain. So, how can that not be good? But it doesn't mean that it's not hard.
Explain, what does processing your grief well look like? How do you know you're doing too much or too little?
First of all, acknowledging how you feel, just even recognizing that this is a grief situation and not judging it. So allowing yourself to take time to have those feelings. And you could even journal these things, right? I think sometimes journaling is really good. The more you can write, this is how I'm feeling without judgment, right? Just let that go. I think especially too when you're talking about a disabled child and that, and depending on the situation, that you are under more stress than other people, right?
Mhm.
And you've got a lot to carry depending on the needs and that. So being able to be gracious to yourself,
Yeah.
that maybe you can't do everything that you want to do because there's some energy that is going this way to the needs of this child and that. So recognizing that maybe you can't be everything you wanted to be and being gracious to yourself about that and accepting that, especially if you're a performer, right? As far as performance is important to you, and maybe you were able to do everything prior to this, but now your life has changed. So a big point of grieving well is adjusting your life to make room for this loss. Now that this has happened to me, how do I adjust my life to deal with this? Right. And being willing, that's an important part of grief too. It can change you and adjusting. So I love that. And then processing, that usually is going to happen with a professional. Not everybody needs that, but it can be if people are feeling stuck or there's feelings that aren't coming out, but just even acknowledging them, writing about them, not judging them, adjusting your life, right, to make room for this, and then being gracious to yourself, I think is really important.
That was the biggest life change for me when I processed my grief was I cut way the heck out of my life. John Mark Comer has this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I had to ruthlessly eliminate everything that was keeping me hurried that I was ultimately using to run away from feeling, and being with my family and being with my son and allowing him to be who he is. But I needed a professional for me in my circumstance with the trauma I have to process that well. How do you recommending finding whether it's a professional or do you recommend having someone else, a person or a community to grieve with? How do you find who to grieve
Uh,
well?
that's a good question. You'd mentioned John Mark Comer's book, which
Yeah.
I think is amazing too. And I think it's great that you would mention that because I think there's a lot of us, especially as women too, right? Like we feel like we're supposed to do it all and we drive ourselves into the ground. And so we need to be gracious and give ourselves this space. Okay, so the community that we might be looking for. Yes, I always love a minded community as far as people who have experienced the same thing. So for me, when I was dealing with my son, I ended up going to a group of other loved people who had loved ones who struggled with mental illness. And that was, oh my goodness, just finding a group that got it, right? Because nobody understood. Nobody understood. And I was very cautious what I would say, right, to people. And people would judge my son as well. And I didn't need that. That didn't help. But there I was with people who got it. And that was so good for me. So if you can ever be in a community of people who have experienced the same thing, I always think that's good. The other thing is obviously a professional, but a professional who gets grief
Yeah.
and how to process grief. And those aren't always that easy to find. There's one organization that I know that does it really well that I'm happy to share with. But most therapists and counselors, it's not that they're not great, but grief is very specific. So I know that oftentimes we will get people who come to us who've been in therapy for a long time, or therapists will send their people to us just because that's what we specialize in. The other thing is, and this is kind of sad, I think, for us, is that we think that maybe we should be able to share this with our friends and family, and sometimes they aren't safe for us.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree or not,
Yeah.
just because they don't know what to do with it. So I always encourage people just be cautious with who you share with, because it's not that people don't care, but they just may not understand or they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And oftentimes they don't want to see us hurting, so they might try to talk us out of it, right? And say things. So now, if you have safe people like that, friends and family, then that's wonderful. But not everybody does.
I found being in other disability organizations, not everyone's processing or trying to get healthy. They're fighting or championing. But for me, other than you, like a free resource community, I really was blessed by was 12 Step. And I know they have Celebrate Recovery and stuff like that. And just going to the first meeting and they said, you're not allowed to hand a Kleenex box if someone's crying. Let them feel their feelings. That was actually freeing to allow it to be rather than be fixed. And I think that's how the emotion gets to really be processed rather than like, oh no, I'm supposed to do this conference instead or solve something this way rather than, but it was so much better just to sit in it.
That's a great idea. And I love that. And you do want people to sit in it because what happens when someone gives you a Kleenex? They're telling you to stop crying. That's not what they mean, by the way. You know, they're trying to help you.
Yeah.
But what it does too is it interferes with what you're experiencing. And we do the same thing, right? Like the ladies and that we work with, they can get their own Kleenexes if they want to, but we're not supposed to touch them or anything because we want everybody to feel all the emotions,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, certainly 12 step is great.
How do you not stay stuck in the emotion, in the grief?
Well, that's a really good point. Is I would say that that's the number one description of people that we work with. They will tell you they're stuck, that they want to feel better, but they don't know what to do. So there's a couple things. One is that oftentimes your situation or your loss can become your identity. If it becomes your identity, then it's very hard to give up. So, for instance, in my case, I was widowed, and that was my identity in the beginning. And you know what, Drexel? It should have been. It absolutely should have been. And I was in a pit, and I should have been in the pit. And I was in the pit for quite a long time. That was appropriate. So, don't judge yourself or others when they are having a tough time for quite a while, especially after a loss, right? That would be absolutely appropriate. And it would be okay to even be a victim, so to speak, right? Like, this happened to me, this is awful. But it's when that continues for a much longer time that we want to take a look at it and say, okay, this is no longer serving me well. I had one woman I'll never forget. We were ready to go on, and she was talking about what had happened to her, and she said, I don't want to do the work because I don't want to give up this identity. And even me, I got some attention for being widowed. And so if I all of a sudden get better in some ways, right, and get some healing, I'm not going to get the same kind of attention. And I kind of liked it. It was a process to work through it. So I don't mean to be judgmental and all that, but there can be a time where we can have that victim mentality. And I've also even seen it in these communities, by the way, sometimes that we can get to where you might hear a message that you'll never be okay. And we don't want that message. And you got to be really careful about hanging out with communities like that, where it's victim, victim. There's a time and a place to go there and acknowledge everything that you're feeling and even what has happened to you and how terrible it is. That is necessary and appropriate. But we don't want that to end up being our identity and who we are long term. I'm not talking about right away.
I think I'm going to link to the grief recovery handbook because that helped me, that
Mhm.
led me through that. And that's something people can read on their own or find a partner they feel safe with. If they don't want to go find a professional or money is a thing, because that could totally be a thing. Um, but I love what you said, where we need to take the time to grieve. It at some point will stop. It doesn't mean rushing the grief either. Like I think about my therapist is Jewish, and she was talking about when
Mhm.
someone dies, they have a 7 day, I hope I say it right, Shiva, right? And everyone
Mhm.
comes, right, and they just grieve together. And then the 40 days of mourning, and then the whole year is expected to be a year of firsts. So every anniversary is going to be a loss that you're going to grieve, and it's just this expectation that grief takes time. And I think with disability, we first had Nightly and we were at early intervention. They said it's going to be like waves. It'll hit you and it won't hit as hard. But I think it will hit you when you face a new angst or loss that you didn't expect. My son is 13, junior high. Is he going to go to a dance? Now relationships are starting to be formed. And so this is a new loss because will he have a relationship? It's a different grief and it's okay. This is just the season and these will come and go. But I'm really encouraged by the verse Psalm 126:5, those who sow with tears will reap songs of joy, and that our tears are are meant to create something, release something, grow something, and that there can be something beautiful at the end of it. That can be a purpose for grief. And I just love that psalm so much whenever I'm crying and I feel like I'm never going to stop.
I think that was really inspirational, what you just said there. And that even what you described about what you see the future, that you're going to have future grief when you're talking about someone who's living and that they're still going to struggle with this or you're going to struggle with it, to again allow yourself to experience that. And that's where I think journaling it too,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
just writing it down and not judging it. Oh, there it is. Yep, I'm feeling the loss. That makes me sad. Doesn't mean you don't love them, that you don't accept them for who they are. That's not it at all. It's just a mama's heart.
Thank
It's just a mama's heart. Even though you might think you've even made progress, there's dips and there's mountains. That's what I say. And it doesn't mean we're going backwards. It's part of it.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Are there any last words of encouragement you want to give a parent who has a kid with a disability?
Any feelings that you have should be welcome and allowed. Give yourself the permission to have that, to really sit with that. And that has nothing to do with you loving your child at all, wanting your child and being okay with who they are and all that. They're just feelings that need to be processed, that may be taking up some unnecessary space and hurting you in some ways, that if we could acknowledge them and release them, you would feel better. You really would. You would be relieved. Just give yourself some grace, get a community, don't judge yourself. And I do think you had mentioned the Grief Recovery Handbook. I think that is a fabulous book. And if anybody wants to work with someone professionally, they can get on the Grief Recovery website, because they could work with someone who could help them process this. And there's all sorts of different price points and that on there. And there's even groups. But people could even do it as friends together. Just want you to know that there is hope, that it's okay to be right where you're at, and that there's a lot that can be done to support you and help you. Our goal is to get you as emotionally healthy as possible. Let's allow ourselves to feel whatever we feel, work through it, and then let's fill up what we've released with good things and nourish ourselves. And I was able to love my child even more after that. But it takes courage, be brave, be hopeful. There's nothing wrong with you. And there is so much help out there. You don't have to do this alone.
Thank you for listening to Inconceivably Worthy. I'd love to end with just this blessing over you. May the Lord bless you as you grieve, as you feel, as you have seasons where it is dark. May you find His light. May you find encouragement and love, and know that you are not alone, and that in all the world and in all of history, there is no one like you. If this episode has been life-giving, I want to invite you to subscribe, share, or even record your own story and tag us of how you have dealt with grieving your child's disability and discovered their worth and what that journey's been like for you. God bless you and be with you, my dear. Thank you.